Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Factory Must Grow, episode 15. Today, we are not joined on the line by anyone. Unfortunately, with the summer craziness, it's been hard to get guests scheduled, both on my own schedule and everyone else's. But again, keep letting me know if you guys know of someone you'd like to hear on the podcast, or you know someone that would like to be on the podcast. Please let me know on the Discord. I'm always looking for more options. And today we'll be looking at another mod spotlight as usual, and we will discuss the very exciting news of Factorio Friday Facts 418 and also 419, and also Satisfactory's new video. So a couple pieces of very exciting news about release dates. And before we dive in, I want to thank all of the show's patrons and supporters. All patrons get a special Discord color, and you guys are the lifeblood of the show. I really appreciate all of you who support in any way, whether it's just by viewing or listening, whether it's participating in the Discord, whether it's leaving comments on YouTube videos, or if you're only here for the podcast, that's great too. I really appreciate all of you. And if you'd like to support the podcast, head over to patreon.com/Krydax. You guys are the best. Thank you very much. So today's mod spotlight is going to be a little bit of a sillier one rather than a serious one. It's kind of halfway in between, I'd say. It's called Vil's Recipe Randomizer. And it was made about 2 years ago by Vilfic, and it randomizes everything. Literally all the recipe. Well, okay, I shouldn't say everything. There are other randomizers, which I haven't tried, so I'm not announcing them or talking about them here. But there's another one that actually randomizes like belt speeds and stuff like that, which also seems like an interesting one that you could maybe combine with this one. I haven't tried that one though. This one only randomizes recipes, but it randomizes all the recipes, and it randomizes them to be very random. And I know the word very random sounds a bit I don't know. It's binary, right? It's random or it's not. But by very random, I mean it can require objects it shouldn't even be able to require. So, for example, an inserter might require 3 coal and 2 copper plates instead of what it normally requires, right? And so by randomizing your recipes, all of a sudden you need to move different items to where they wouldn't normally need to be. And I think ore is the best example of that, because normally as a Factorio player, you're used to just smelting all your ore into plates and then sending those plates on to do things. But when you have the recipe randomizer on, now all of a sudden your stone and your copper ore are needed in various recipes. And it's a fun kind of challenge in different. It's like, it's not necessarily a well-balanced experience, but it's fun because it's random, and it's fun because you have to do different things you've never had to do before. It also has some settings, so you can change it so that recipes only require recipes that are above them in the tech tree, which means, like, I don't have a tech tree in front of me, so I don't know what the order is, but, things that are prerequisites for other researches are the only ones that it will look at for what can be ingredients. So if you've got, let's say, an electric furnace, it's not going to require something to the side of it in the tech tree, but only stuff above it. However, you can set it so that you can have it allow for any object that you could research, which means it could even require more complicated objects or further down in the tech tree objects or items. But because you wouldn't be tech blocked, like you could go research that and then build those and then bring them back to make the item you're now trying to make. And so really it makes it so that anything goes. It just won't allow you to be, hard locked in the tech tree. So that is an option if you want it. And that obviously increases the difficulty a little bit more, because then you have to make potentially even more complex things to make the simpler things. It does balance the costs. It kind of does some sort of calculations on raw ores and how many total raw ores something requires. But you can set that to be random as well. So you can set it, I think by default, it ranges between 1/2 and double the cost. And so for each recipe, it'll say, okay, how much is this going to cost? Okay, 1.8 times the normal amount. And then it will figure out, okay, what items is it going to cost? And then you can also randomize how many tiers different it can be, right? So like tier 1 would be ore. or I don't know, maybe it's tier 0 is ore. And then tier 1 would be plates, and then tier 2 would be things like inserters or copper cable. And so you can also randomize how far off it allows to change the tiers. So something that might have used to require, inserters as an ingredient, if you can shift 2 tiers, it could only require ore as an ingredient, or it could go up the other direction. So it's really crazy. I did try it on my space block run. It was pretty fun. My space block run didn't last very long, unfortunately. I don't remember why I quit that one early. I either lost interest or went on to something else. But all that to say, Vill's Recipe Randomizer, it's fun to try. I'd say if what I just talked about sounds fun, give it a try. It really gives you a different experience than you're used to with Factorio. And I would say even with modded Factorio, it gives you a different experience. And that's because of it requires you to do things you've never done before. Partially because it doesn't make any sense. And so that's why it's fun. I will say, if you do go with the recipe randomizer world, add a couple other like fun quality of life mods in there too. It can get a little tedious because it is so random. You kind of need every item everywhere. And so just get used to having a lot of belts going around all over the place. It is pretty ridiculous spaghetti, but I'd suggest it. It's pretty fun. It even works with mods. So you could do, Angel Bob's randomized. I don't know how well it works when it comes to the more complex loops and because lots of things in mod packs have catalysts and they also have byproducts. So I don't know how it all works in terms of the balance with that, but you could always try it. Anyway, I'm going to move on to the very exciting news of Factorio Friday Facts 418, the release date. Factorio Space Age is finally officially going to be released on October 21st of 2024. That is only 3 months from now. Very exciting. They said in the post, really the post was all about the release date. There wasn't too much in there. Basically, they said we're going to release it on October 21st. The reasoning for this date is it gives us enough time to polish the game after summer vacation, but also enough time to bug fix before Christmas vacations. And the price is going to be $35, which is the same price as the base game. Also, I'm going to go on a short rant about how cheap this game is and how mad I am at people who complained when they increased the price to $35. First of all, a price increase from $30 to $35 is quite small. We're talking at least, and I'm talking America here. I know different countries, like the amount of money that a game costs is different relative to wages and how much other things cost. And so I realize that in certain other countries, it might actually be a problem. I'm just talking about America, and I'm talking about people who speak English and complained in English and complained in dollars. How ridiculous it is to complain about a game that has thousands of hours of gameplay only going up $5 4 or 5 years after the game came out. And we're talking 4 or 5 years of the company developing the game. They've been continually updating the game. And even since 1.0, while they haven't released new content, they even did some quality of life stuff, I think, in 1.1. And they've continued to release bug fixes. And so it just seems silly to be like, oh yeah, inflation's not real. A game should cost the same forever, even though they're continuing to do work on it. If you think about older games, I think what's weird is people they want to have their cake and eat it too, right? They want to have the benefit of modern games where companies continue to develop it and release updates, but then they also want to have the benefit of old games that came out on the shelf. And those games, they were as is, right? The game was released, you bought the box off the shelf for $50 or whatever, and you'd go home and you had the game. But it wouldn't get updates almost ever. It started to become slightly more common over time, but back in the day, the game was the same price and then it would go down over time, but that's because the game was not alive, right? The game was not living. It was kind of taxidermied, right? Like it was frozen in time to that release thing that you bought, and that's it. But now games are alive and companies continue to support them. And that means companies continue to pay their developers money to work on that game. And so it makes sense that the game would remain the same price, because not only is it adding the same value as it always has, but it continues to add more value over time. So it makes sense that the price wouldn't go down, because the product is not becoming less valuable. At least that's how I see it. And arguably the product is becoming more valuable. And, you know, inflation, like, I understand that it's annoying when prices go up, but like, prices go up. I don't know what else to say. Like, they have to pay their devs more money now than they did 5 years ago. And so it makes sense that the things they're selling should be slightly more expensive. Like, everything just slowly goes up in price. And if you're working on a game for as long as Wooba has worked on it and will continue to work on it, I'm thinking future here too, right? Like, they've been working on Space Age. They know they're going to keep working on Space Age. So there's a long runway here. And if you never change your price in that time, you are losing a lot of money to inflation as a company. So it doesn't seem crazy to me to increase the price by 16% after being out for, you know, if you count the early access, like 5 or 6 years or whatever, or even more than that. When did it come out? 2016, 2015? Trying to remember when the early access came out. It's been out for a long time. Anyway, that's my rant about price. You know, I understand people are mad about companies being greedy, but be mad at the AAA companies who sell you a $70 game with day one DLC. Don't be mad at the companies who make one of the best games of all time and they only increase the price from $30 to $35. Like, that is completely acceptable. I think, you know, at least in terms of the value, the game is worth far more than any other $60 or $70 game I've ever bought. So, and that's a personal opinion. I understand not everyone shares that, but all that to say, Wooba is not the people to be mad at about price hikes. Yeah, and someone on Twitch is saying, you know, some people in the community have said, like, it's disrespectful to increase price. No, it's not disrespectful. Like, come on, Wooba has to eat. They're a business. They're not just doing this for passion and love. Like, they are selling you a product and you are compensating them for that. And if you can't afford that, I'm sorry that you can't afford that, but that doesn't make it wrong for them to want to, you know, make a living off of their job. That's literally their job. You know what I mean? So anyway, all right, rant over. I'm going to move on to the rest of the Friday Facts, which was them talking about the content that's in Space Age. And I think this is a good recap. That none of this is fresh news, but it's a good recap of both what they've announced and also kind of their selling points. So I believe this is pretty similar to what's on the Steam page. By the way, there is a Steam page for Space Age now, so go wishlist it. But yeah, so I'll kind of just read. I normally don't read verbatim, but I think this is a good time to. So I'm just going to be reading their bullet points, and you can kind of enjoy the ride of what we're going to get to experience in a few months here. So the first one is space platforms, the backbone of planetary logistics and the first foray into space. Space platforms are flying factories that act as the means of transportation between planets. You will build defenses to shoot down incoming asteroids which threaten to smash your platform. Side note, there's a video on the Steam page of a space platform, and they show a chonking asteroid smashing into the space platform. That was really cool. Like, it was a big boy. We're talking, it was almost the size of like the rocket silo. Maybe more like an oil refinery. Okay, anyway, you also can catch asteroid chunks, crush them, and process them into thruster fuel and turret ammunition. Well, that's nice. You can use the platform hub and cargo bays to shuttle cargo between planets. The next one is Vulcanists. Oh, by the way, they have links to each of the relevant Factorio Friday Facts in this post, so it's a good place to kind of go to get all of the major plot points, so to speak. So on Vulcanus, there are blazing volcanic mountains, imposing geological landforms, plains blanketed in ash, and thick yellow sulfuric fog that burns your lungs and etches your eyes. You will extract and refine tough, unbreakable tungsten to craft big mining drills and foundries. You'll pull lava from the pits to produce an abundance of molten iron and copper, and you will research advanced metallurgic technologies to build an industrial forge world. Fulgora, which is FFF 398 and 399, is a lifeless and desolate place. The thin air is freezing cold, but bone dry. A distant sun twinkles in the dull purple of the sky. Wispy clouds race by as a gale whips up sand that grates against your armor. You'll have to protect yourself from the nightly lightning storms and harness their unrelenting power for your own electricity needs. You will reclaim the high-tech scraps and ruins of a long-forgotten civilization and recycle them into usable products. And you will unlock the advanced electromagnetic and superconducting powers of holmium. Gleba, or Gleba, not sure yet, is a vibrant and multicolored swampy landscape shrouded in a light mist. The air is thick and humid, carrying the muffled cries of unseen animals from far away. You'll discover exotic plants, cultivate and harvest their fruits with agriculture towers, and you will cook, crush, and process your produce before they rot and turn to spoilage, which is an entirely new mechanic, I'll just say, as an aside. You'll venture into a new realm of biochemical engineering. Another one is elevated rails. You will take your trains to the next level. Elevated rails bring a whole new dimension of challenge and possibility to your rail networks. Heavy-duty ramps and supports to elevate your rails, and you can cross over obstacles, build supports on the water to cross oceans, and design advanced multi-level intersections to optimize your train system. I mean, this is one that I'm ridiculously excited about. It's so simple. In a lot of ways, at least in terms of how you actually can design things, it's not that different than just having underground belts, but for trains. But I think it's going to be way cooler than that in practice. All right, the next bullet point is quality. You can make high tiers of quality of all your items, machines, and equipment. Every item, entity, and equipment has 5 possible qualities, from normal all the way up to legendary. Side note, they still haven't said anything about changing the names, and I think at this point we can expect they are not going to change the names. And by names, I mean like what they're calling each tier. Right now it's normal, uncommon, rare. I missed one. Normal, uncommon, rare, something, and legendary. Oh, epic. Epic is the 4th one. Okay, back to what I'm saying. Research the new quality modules and use them to craft higher quality items and intermediates. Each level of quality gives a greater bonus. Machines craft faster, equipment is more powerful, turrets have increased range, etc. And beyond is the next bullet point. The journey doesn't end there. There's a lot more coming with Factorio Space Age and a lot more left to be revealed. Space Age music is one thing they mention. Each new planet is accompanied by a unique soundtrack. New enemies and defenses. Some new planets are inhabited by unique and dangerous creatures you will need to defend against. And an enigmatic 5th planet promises some of the most unique gameplay, but it remains shrouded in mystery. It's the furthest planet from the sun, so it's dark and cold. And then the last one, Factorio 2.0. But that's not all. Factorio Space Age will also coincide with the release of Factorio version 2.0, which will be a free upgrade for all users. Version 2.0 has a wide range of changes and improvements, such as smarter worker robots, new rails, remote view, combinator and circuit network improvements, train control improvements, the new fluid system, overhauled Novice terrain generation, and more each week. So yeah, I mean, it's just a huge amount of stuff. And like I said, none of that is news to those of us that have been following the FFFs, though we might have forgotten about some of them. I feel like at this point, there are so many freaking features that they've announced that I can't even keep them all in working memory. Like, I don't really know what I'm going to get into the game and I'm going to be like, oh yeah, I completely forgot that this is even a thing, because there's just so many things that they've announced. It's crazy. I think I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and I'll probably say it 100 times again. Space Age is a bigger game added onto Factorio than Factorio was a game. Like they are more than doubling the game that we're getting, which is crazy to me, because that's not normally how expansions go. In fact, I can't think of an expansion to any game ever. Now, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. It might be true that this exists, but I can't think of one right now in my gaming history where a game has come out with a DLC or expansion or whatever you want to call it that has more than doubled the game in size. I mean, It really is crazy. And not only doubled the game in size, but in mechanics. Like they're not just adding content where it's like, oh yeah, it's like Factorio, but they added more than twice as many recipes and twice as much tech tree. Even if they did that, that still pales in comparison to what they're doing in Space Age. Like it's crazy. They're adding like all these new mechanics, they're adding all these new planets, they are adding probably at least twice as many like entities and recipes and enemies. It's nuts. Someone saying Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 counts compared to the original RCT. I would argue no. I've played both, and I would say RCT2 is very much what you expect in an expansion. It is closer to what I was saying, where maybe they did add twice as many actual pieces of content, but it's still basically the same game. Like there were a lot of little improvements, but there's no new overall mechanics where you're like, oh my gosh, spoilage is now a thing. Like there's nothing like that in Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. It's just smoother, everything's better. And again, it's not an expansion, it is a new game. Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 had its own expansions, so I would argue that doesn't even count as the same genre of thing. Because Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 had its expansions, and then Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 was the sequel game, which then had its expansions. It's not an expansion to Roller Coaster Tycoon 1. Though on the code base, it might have looked like that. Anyway, I digress. Someone said Binding of Isaac Repentance. I don't know anything about Binding of Isaac, so that might definitely be a thing. But anyway, moving on. Wishlist, Factorio Space Age. Get excited about it and set your calendars for October 21st. Going to be really good. And the next big announcement in the world of automation gaming, and I should say I'm making a lot of asides today, but as an aside, I am not well versed in the world of automation gaming as some others are. Like we had Wally on the podcast, and he plays all sorts of automation games that I've never even heard of. So I like to think of this as an automation podcast, but it's not a complete like news article about automation games. If you want that, I do recommend going and watching people like Wally 1169, because he's really good at finding the new niche games, and you can watch a gameplay video of his and you can see, oh, that looks like a fun game for me. Like I'm not someone that's going to go and spend hours playing every single game. I just don't have the time and energy to do that. But like this is still a genre I'm very passionate about. So I am going to talk about the big players. I'm going to talk about the big news, but I'm probably not going to get into like, oh, there was a new game released this week that, has only 70 reviews, but they're all very positive and maybe you should go play it. Like I'm not going to do that most weeks. There might be some weeks where I dive into the weeds of some of the smaller games, but most weeks I won't. Another comment I want to make is there is another podcast. I think I've mentioned this once. I need to mention it more often. This is a podcast I couldn't find when I was originally looking for a Factorio podcast, but there is another one. It's called The Bottleneck. Bottleneck Show? Bottleneck Podcast? Oh, shoot. Now I need to look it up. It's one of those two. And it's called The Bottleneck Show. And they talk about more of kind of the general news, and those two guys, they're really great, and they play a lot more of like, each individual game and stuff. So if you are looking for a broader podcast, I would recommend going and checking them out. And yeah, that's all I have to say about that. So anyway, back to the big news of Satisfactory. They announced their release date only a few days after Factorio. In usual Coffee Stain Studios style, they had a 2 or 3 hour countdown to a live stream. And, people in the chat were all hyped up, and everyone kind of knew it was probably going to be about it was on the same day. You're right. Everyone kind of knew it was going to be about the release date because Snut had announced previously that the release date would be announced soon. So everyone was assuming that's what it was. And, people are getting all hyped up. And go watch the video yourself. I'll just say right now, pause the podcast, go watch it yourself, or skip ahead, 5 minutes in the podcast if you don't want a spoiler and you're driving in your car, because it's pretty fun to watch it yourself for the first time. It's not what you expect. I'll just say that. But in usual Coffee Stain Studios style, it starts the video, shows the engineer, and all of a sudden their tummy starts rumbling, and you can tell that they've got to go to the bathroom. And so they start sprinting through their factory, and finally they get back to the hub, and you see them run into the hub, and you hear the toilet flush. And that's it. That's the big announcement. Toilet flush. It's finally a thing. And then in small text, and 1.0 is coming on September 10th. So, they buried the lead as usual. And September 10th is the release date for Satisfactory 1.0, which is not quite as big as Space Age in terms of, changes, because, well, they're finally releasing the game in its full form. And right now it's close to that in its early access form. So there's a lot added. There's a lot refined. They talk about it's officially confirmed that Tier 9 is going to be a thing, which is part of Milestone 5, and that will be the final tier before you win the game, whatever that looks like. I assume just completing, what's it called, Project Assembly or something, doing all the space elevator stuff is how you beat the story. I presume there is still some end game and you can keep working on your factory after that, but that's kind of Tier 9 is the last official tier. So Sam Orr will have some sort of usage. People are going wild with the speculations, and there's a lot of little, what's the word I'm looking for? Easter eggs in the video showing off new stuff from Satisfactory 1.0. So other YouTubers have done videos of trying to find every single thing that's spoiled in that. So I recommend you go check out, if you just Google Satisfactory release video, I'm sure you'll find 5 or 10 videos. I've seen quite a few pop up on my feed already. I personally, because I'm not as obsessive about Satisfactory as I am with Factorio, I haven't watched those videos. I kind of want to be surprised. I'm excited to fire up Satisfactory 1.0 and not totally know what I'm getting into. So I'm more or less staying, semi spoiler free. If I see a spoiler, I'm not going to be worried about it. But I'm also excited about it because there's a storyline, and it's not going to be probably insanely deep. But compared to Factorio, there's infinitely more story in Satisfactory, and they've confirmed that the story will be a relevant part of the game. It's not just background info. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm really excited about Satisfactory. I'm really excited that they're coming out. Satisfactory and Factorio Space Age are coming out 40 days apart, because that means we'll actually have time to play both of them and we won't be competing. And I'm also happy that Satisfactory is first, because I'm guessing I will put a lot more hours into Space Age than Satisfactory. I'm not sure of this, but I'm guessing it's going to be a longer game. I think Space Age is going to be longer to play through than Satisfactory will, even if you're just beating both. That's based on my current knowledge of Satisfactory and my current understanding of Space Age, so that could be very wrong, but it seems like Space Age might be even a 100-hour journey if you're rushing, to beat the whole thing. And it seems like Satisfactory, I would struggle to think they've added enough to make it a 100-hour journey. Because last time I was able to get to not finishing tier 4, but I was able to get to I had unlocked tier 8, and it was only 25 or 30 hours. And so I'm I don't see how getting to tier 9 and finishing that could add another 70 hours to the game. We'll see. But I'm anticipating Satisfactory 1.0 is going to be a shorter experience than Space Age. Of course you could make it longer. It always depends on how you play, but if you assume a similar play style in both games, I think Space Age is going to be about twice as long, at least. Because, the Kovarex, the dev for Factorio, was talking about his playthrough still taking 170 hours, even on the second playthrough after they had tried to make things shorter. And he did say that was still too long. So I'm guessing that they're aiming more for like 100 hours because they realize that they don't want to make Pyanodons or space exploration, but, you know, they want to make an approachable game since it is the official experience. So I'm guessing they're going to try to cut that under 100 hours, but we'll see. We'll see what it ends up being. Anyway, moving on. Those are some really exciting announcements, and I'm happy that we now know you can plan your, you know, if you have vacation days that you can kind of take for fun to play a game, then definitely September 10th and on, or October 21st and on are good options. It's also nice, the Factorio one, that it is pretty soon before Thanksgiving and Christmas, because those are holidays that people often have already. All right, there was one more Factorio Friday Facts since the last podcast, and this was 419, display panels and inserter pickup fixes. So they talked about wanting to have some sort of sign, you know, that you could put in the game. It's a little bit different than like a constant combinator on alt mode because this doesn't require alt mode to exist. It's like an actual screen, and they wanted to have something where you could put icons and words and stuff. So they tried a wooden sign, they tried some sort of flat text plate looking thing, and finally they went with like a CRT, kind of a borderless CRT monitor look, and it's mounted. Sorry, my throat's getting real dry. It's mounted on a kind of a combinator looking thing. I think they look really cool, and you can show messages above them. And you can set it to where they'll only show the message on highlight, or they'll show the message all the time. You can show different icons. You can hook them up to the circuit network and make it so that they only show, or you can set a bunch of conditions like show the iron plate icon if iron plates are less than 10,000, you know, and whatever condition is true first, it'll return that symbol and message. My thought, though, is like they're way too small. They have a GIF in the Friday Facts of a space platform, and they're showing they're using the display panel to show what is being crafted in an assembler. And it took me a while to even find it. I was like, oh, look, a GIF. And I look around and I was like, oh, is there a display panel? It doesn't look like there's a display panel. Where is it? Is there a display panel? Oh, there's the display panel. Like, it took me forever to even find the thing. And if the whole point of it is to display something, I don't think that's a good thing. They blend in really well. And then again, it's like, I don't know if that's a good thing for a display screen. My hope, someone mentioned this on the Reddit, and I was like, yeah, that's a good idea, is that they would make it kind of almost a multi-blockable thing where you could place a bunch of them in a little square. Like you could do a 2x2 square of display panels, and they would merge into one bigger display panel, because I think a 1x1 display panel is just too small. In fact, at least based on their video, they have alt mode off, which is what's hard. I don't know what it will look like with alt mode on. But with alt mode off, the little icon that's on the display screen, I think is even smaller than the icon that shows up above like a chest or a constant combinator on alt mode. And those are already pretty small. So I am a bit concerned about the visibility and readability of it. But we'll see. We'll see. You know, I haven't played with it. It's hard to say. It seems a bit more focused on multiplayer or people who like to decorate than it does like sheer value, because I can't even really think of like what I would use that for in my base, you know, other than, yeah, maybe displaying an icon of what's being currently crafted. I guess they have some logic that's helpful that combinators don't, of like displaying the first condition that is true on a list of conditions. So maybe it'll be good if you're wanting some sort of prioritization of like, what resource am I running the lowest on? It might be easier to do that with a display panel than with combinators. But more or less, I can't immediately see where I'm going to use them in a in like a solo playthrough. But I'll probably try to find ways to use them. It's a fun feature. I think a lot of people are very excited about them. I'm a bit more neutral. Like, I'm glad they're being added. I think it's a good feature. I don't think it will be used by me a ton, and I guess we'll see if I'm right about that or not. And then the other piece, which is a small piece but important, is inserter pickup fixes to this Friday Facts. So they also announced that with the old inserters, even the fast inserters, which is the blue ones, couldn't even grab an item off of the new. They added a new belt tier, if you don't remember, which is the green belts, and those move 60 items a second. And if you have an underground green belt, the blue inserters couldn't even grab an item off of those because they fly so fast. So they were like, okay, this is bad. Fast inserters should be able to grab items from any belt. So essentially what they did is they just kind of figured out, where's this problem coming from? And apparently it was really the extension speed of the inserter, kind of how fast it moves forwards and backwards, like in and out, more so than swinging around. And that was pretty slow. So they changed it to be a little faster. And then they also made the snapping logic a little better, I guess, or I don't know if it's better or just more generous, like where it snaps a few more pixels faster. I don't know. But either way, they did mention there are no more issues with that, and it buffs inserters a little bit. And I'm curious to know how much of a buff it actually is, because the grab time is non-zero, especially when you're dealing with things like stack inserters, when they're kind of hunting from one side of the belt to the other. Like if you have a belt that's not fully compressed and it's kind of sporadic, and then you have a stack inserter, sorry, I should say bulk inserter now. They're not stack inserters anymore. If you have a bulk inserter, sometimes it would kind of hunt from one to the next, and that could delay it. And sometimes it might miss one because it was hunting for the other one. So I'm curious how much they're actually buffed based on this change. It might be a decent amount, because if they're snapping from one item to the next quite a bit quicker, I think it's still probably a small overall buff, but in certain circumstances, it could make a pretty big difference. Oh yeah, one other thing. Sorry, I did forget one thing with the display panels. Thank you, Alor, for mentioning that in Twitch chat. The display panels can show on the map screen. So you can show the icon and the text on the map. Kind of like you can already make map labels. Well, now you can have your display panel basically be a map label, which is super nice because then you can actively update what the display panel is showing. So I guess, yeah, I had completely forgotten about that. And that is probably the thing I will use it for the most as well, now that I think about it. Because being able to show on the map, some words and an icon, then you don't even have to zoom in to see what's going on. You can just look at the map and it'll show, oh, iron is needed. Oh, copper is needed. And you can easily just see that from map view, and you don't have to zoom in and look at intricate things and whatnot. So that'll be pretty nice. Yeah, I like that. I had forgotten about that bit. Trying to think of how else I could use them. That'll probably be the main use, is just alerting me to what's needed. The hard thing is we already had speakers, and we could pretty easily just look at a buffer, and if buffer, or maybe a reserve is a better word, and if the reserves are starting to empty out, well, you can alert that with an alarm. So I guess I'm struggling to see when I will use a display panel where I couldn't have easily used an alarm. And that feels like a little bit of a smaller, whatchamacallit? A smaller list of things. Yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see. So, yeah. That is all I have for the Factorio Friday Facts. Another announcement I have, just in general about the podcast before I wrap up. Today's a little bit of a shorter cast. Ideally, this is a little bit more how all of my podcasts would be, closer to the 40 to 60 minute range, but I apparently like to talk a lot about things and can keep going. So I'm kind of glad we have a shorter podcast for once. And some of you might be like, no, I like the longer cast, but I do want to try to be a little bit restrained in my podcast length. But yeah, so with the cast, I am moving to a once every 2 weeks schedule. And that is partially because of my own schedule being a little bit busier these days. It's partially because it gives me more time to potentially find guests and be a little bit more consistent about that. Because I've kind of been doing once every 2 weeks anyway, because I've kind of canceled once every other week for the last few weeks. And the summer's been busier. And at some point, if I feel like I have enough content that I want to talk about and I have enough guests that I want to bring on, and there's all of that going on, I could go back to once a week. But right now, once a week has felt a little too busy to me. It's felt a little too restrictive. So we're going to go to once every 2 weeks. And I think that way I can put a little bit more time and energy into each of those and hopefully make each cast a little bit higher quality, even though it's only once every 2 weeks. And as far as which 2 weeks, I think what we're going to do is I'm going to do the first and third Sunday of every month, because then the vacation that I'm taking next week won't interfere with the podcast. So that does mean we're going to go 2 weeks without a podcast until, what is that, August 4th? But the good news is, then you'll know kind of when the podcasts are coming. And I will make this a much harder set in the stone commitment. I feel like right now it's kind of been it's every week unless I say otherwise. And this will be no, it's going to be on those days, or around those days if my guest can't make it on those days. And I won't shift that unless, there's more of an emergency type thing that comes up, which obviously then I would need to. But I definitely, you can expect first and third Sunday of the month, or again, right around that if my guest can't do Sunday, to see the podcast. And so that's the plan moving forward. I think that's a more sustainable plan. I don't think I'll get burnt out doing once every 2 weeks. I think if I were to do once every week, I might get burnt out eventually, because I am starting. There were some of these weeks where I'm I want to do the podcast, but I don't really have a big list of things I want to talk about. And it started to feel a little bit loose, especially because right now I'm not playing Factorio. And so because I'm not playing an automation game, I'm playing GT&H, but because I'm not playing Factorio or Satisfactory, I feel like I have a little bit less to talk about, and I don't want to make every episode about Greg Tech New Horizons. And so I was starting to feel like I'm a little bit running out of automation stuff that I want to talk about every single weekend. So I think once every 2 weeks is good. You can let me know what you guys think in Discord. JD Plays is in the Twitch chat. You will be back, JD. We'll find a time. Your Australia time zone is not the easiest thing in the world, but I am excited to have you back on the cast, and we will talk more. Especially Captain of Industry already has update 3 they're talking about, which they just came out with update 2. And one other thing JD said about the display panels for Factorio is that they don't make noise or have alerts. And I do agree with that. And sometimes that's what you want. With the alarms, I usually turned off the noise anyway and just had the blinking light. But with the display, you don't have either of that. So I guess you could mix and match depending on what type of alert you want. If you want the alert that only shows up in map view when you look at that part of the map, then the display panel's good. If you want the alert that blinks in the bottom of your screen, then you'll use an alarm with no noise. If you want the noise, you can use the alarm. I guess you could do all 3 if you really want to. But yeah, all that to say, I'm going to move towards wrapping up this episode. Thank you all for listening. It's been really fun. We're already on episode 15 of the podcast, and it feels like, in some ways, it feels like we just started. In other ways, it feels like, we've gotten really far. But I started this kind of as a passion project, just thinking, this is something that I think is underrepresented in the podcast world. And I've always kind of wanted to have more of a forum to just discuss some of this stuff. I tend to do that a lot in my videos. I'll go on these long rants and discussions about game mechanics and game design and other things. And so I really was hoping for a forum where I could discuss these things and I could discuss them with guests. And so far, the guests that we've had have been really awesome. People like Dosh Doshington and Wooba Dev and Rygard and other, big streamers like JD Plays and Bold Viking and Wally. And it's just been really cool to have people from all these different categories. And so, yeah, I'm really happy with how the podcast has gone so far. And I know those of you that are listening are probably enjoying it. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be listening to episode 15. So I'm glad you all are here, and I am very much appreciative of all of your support. Yeah, and as far as financial support, like I'd love to make content creation a bit more of a full-time gig. It just isn't that for me yet financially. So do know, like, I don't want to pressure anybody. You guys know what you should do with your money. At least I hope you know what you should do. If you don't, go take a finance class. There's plenty of free ones online. But if you don't know what you should, or if you do know what you should do with your money, then don't let me pressure you into giving it to me. But if you do find, my channel, whether it's the podcast or more of my YouTube and Twitch stuff or both, to be valuable, like, I really do appreciate the support, because as the support grows, it allows me to make more dedicated time slots in my week where I'm like, yeah, I'm actually like going and making some money with this time by working on content, rather than, oh, I'm just kind of doing my hobby content thing, and that means I'm not going and doing something that's making money to survive. And so the more support that I have, the more I'm able to do that. And I know it's not like, sometimes as you support a channel, it kind of feels like this vague support, and it's like, well, yeah, that's kind of how it works. But I just want you all to know that, like, with the Patreon support and Twitch subs and the support, you can also support through the podcast link. And I think that's directly through Stripe. And I don't think, as far as I know, Spotify doesn't take a cut of that. So that's actually like a almost 100% of your money would go to me type of support. All of that is really appreciated. And I promise you, it is very much like helping me make more content. It's not just for fun or whatever. It also, once in a while when I need to buy a computer upgrade or something, it helps with that too. So do know that your money is going to a good cause, as much as it can. And I appreciate the support greatly, because honestly, if I hadn't had the support I've had financially, I probably wouldn't be able to do as much as I do now. And I wouldn't be able to do, I wouldn't have been able to get like some of my computer upgrades that I've gotten. And so it's really helped to have that support. So all this to say, I really appreciate everyone, whether you can support financially or not. The community that you all have built in Krydania and in the Discord has been amazing. I've loved to see people chatting with each other. I feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself now. And I couldn't have done it without all of you members of the community. And for those of you who have just been a podcast listener so far, I really do encourage you to go check out the Krydania Discord. You can lurk there. It's totally fine. But we talk about a lot of fun things there. And if you like the content of this podcast, you probably would like a lot of the discussions we have on the Discord, because they often are on very similar topics. And sometimes we go even way deeper. So definitely head over to the Discord if you find this interesting, because I think you'll find the Discord interesting too. Well, that's all I got for you guys today. Again, thank you for listening. The next cast will be a few weeks from now on August 4th. And we'll be talking about the FFFs. We'll be talking about I'm sure there will be some other news for Satisfactory by then. So if you have any questions, ideas for topics or guests, or just any random thoughts you have that you'd like me to discuss on the podcast, please head over to the Discord and let me know there. As always, thank you for listening. We'll see you next week. And always remember, the factory must grow.